Krohat bhavati sammoha, sammohat smriti vibhrama, smriti bhramshat buddhinasho, buddhinashat pranashyati. In the context of Bhagavad Gita, Arjun is stuck in a conflict because on the one hand he knows that he should fight because he is a warrior, that is his duty. On the other hand, he is facing the enemy who are all his family relatives.
Sid, we know that you're very passionate about the Bhagavad Gita and done a lot of work to understand it deeper. So, which shloka are we going to take up today? I would love to hear some shlokas from the horse's mouth.
So, you're right, I have been very passionate about Bhagavad Gita, and it's been an interesting story for me because when I was a kid, my grandmom actually used to take Bhagavad Gita lessons for our community in Kerala.
Oh, wow.
So I remember during my school vacation days, we would attend Bhagavad Gita classes with her. And she knew Sanskrit. So she used to teach me the words, the meaning, and how to read Sanskrit. This was before Sanskrit had started in my school also.
Oh, wow.
And what was really interesting was at that time, Bhagavad Gita was just a story. For all kids, I think, when we are learning a mythological story, it doesn't have any greater significance than that. But I remember after I had finished my MBBS, and I had a 1 month break before I started my residency, I remember telling my grandmom that I want to read Bhagavad Gita again. So she and I read it again. This was after a gap of almost 10, 15 years. And I remember reading it very differently because I started seeing meaning in things that I didn't see meaning before.
Understood.
And I did this again after I finished my MD, which was 4 years later. And this was after I have gained some understanding about the body, the brain. And I read it again, and the meaning changed.
Interesting.
And finally, 3-4 years ago, I read it again, but this time I did it on a live stream. So I did it in front of my YouTube community, and I did 18 videos, 18 chapters. And this time I was reading it as a neurologist. And suddenly it felt like every verse had so much neuroscientific meaning. Because a lot of the Bhagavad Gita talks about senses, happiness, the brain, how to maintain your focus, what does it mean to be anxious. These are all relevant topics in today's world that even neuroscientific studies are trying to answer. And I thought that there is definitely more to this than even I had appreciated. So I started translating it from a neuroscience perspective. And my interest in Bhagavad Gita has only grown since then. So if we can take one verse, and there are many verses, it wasn't easy to just pick one, but there's one verse, it's in chapter 2, I think it's verse 63. So I can just read it out first, and if anybody's listening and they want to read it with me, you can. And I'm going to read it in the tune that my grandmom has taught me, okay? So it goes like this. Krohat bhavati sammoha, sammohat smriti vibhrama, smriti bhramshat buddhinasho, buddhinashat pranashyati. So the translation of this verse is that from anger comes delusion, from delusion comes loss of memory, from loss of memory there is destruction of intelligence, and from the destruction of intelligence one is lost. This is the shloka, this is the verse. In the context of Bhagavad Gita, this is Lord Krishna telling this to Arjuna, because in the story Arjun is stuck in a conflict because on the one hand he knows that he should fight because he is a warrior, that is his duty. On the other hand, he is facing the enemy who are all his family relatives, and he suddenly feels that this is not right, he should not be doing this. So he's basically in a conflict, and he is going through the result of conflict, which is anxiety. And this is not unique to Arjun. Every single human being who has ever lived has experienced some form of conflict. Should I do this or should I do this? And many of us have experienced anxiety because of that, not knowing what to do. And in that context, Krishna is saying this. What I found very interesting in this verse particularly is that if you look at it from a neuroscience perspective, just this verse, forget about everything else, anger is a core biological response. You feel angry when you think that you have lost control over something. That's when you are angry. And it's something that you are caring about. You find that important enough to get angry. If somebody crashes into your car, you've heard the term road rage. Right? So what is happening in road rage is that before that, you are a calm, rational human being driving the car. Somebody rams into you. You are no longer a calm, rational human being. Your brain has been completely taken over by your primitive brain, the limbic system. And inside the limbic system is an area called amygdala, which is responsible for detecting threat. So in that moment, your body goes into fight and flight, and predominantly fight. You are now an animal, completely. Your heart is beating fast, there is cortisol levels rising up. You are now entirely tensed. Your body has become very tensed. All your thoughts are violent. And your worldview has changed. Before this moment, you were thinking about your future, your kids, or your job, or all of that. But in that moment of anger, your worldview has changed. There's only one thing that is important to you, which is to hurt that other person. This is a false worldview. There are other things important as well. But in that moment of anger, all you can think about is this one person has done this thing. That is what delusion is. So delusion is a false narrative about the world. And anger does that. When you are angry, you are deluded. You are not seeing the world properly. You are seeing a very twisted form of the world. Right? So that's what the first line means. From anger comes delusion. You are now living in a false world. From delusion comes loss of memory. When you are in that delusion, you can't remember what your parents told you. You can't remember what is law. You can't remember what is right and wrong. You have forgotten everything. You've forgotten who you are. So there's loss of memory. And this is true in a neuroscientific way as well. Because when you're very, very angry and I ask you to remember somebody's phone number, you won't be able to remember it. That is not the time to remember. Because you don't have access to those networks.
So the memory becomes selective.
Very selective.
Only negative.
Only negative. Only the memories that heighten your sense of anger will come to you. The others are not accessible to you. If I ask you, when you're very, very angry, if I ask you, tell me one good thing about your life, you will not be able to remember. Every couple who has ever fought has experienced this. Like your partner is really angry at you, you're telling them, but remember the good times. No, they don't. Right? Because they are in delusion and there is loss of memory. From loss of memory, there is destruction of intelligence. So if you are very angry, you can't remember all the good times. I tell you, be rational. Can't we be logical about this? Let's think about it. You will not be able to. Because the part of your brain that is intelligent is your prefrontal cortex. And when you are in extreme emotion, any emotion, your prefrontal cortex shuts down.
Every logical thinking is gone.
Everything is out of the window. You cannot, it's physically, it is biologically impossible for you to be rational,
in
be
that
logical
moment.
in that moment. If you are extremely emotional, it's like the needle. Imagine if there's a needle from your prefrontal cortex to your limbic system. Your needle is completely in your limbic system. Your prefrontal cortex has no say in the matter. So there's destruction of intelligence. You can't think rationally in that moment. Imagine road rage. What do? They might go into the boot of the car, take out a stick. They might start acting like an absolute animal because that's what they are in that moment. Their prefrontal cortex is not functioning. And from the destruction of intelligence, one is lost.
So the perception of reality is gone as well.
Yes. So perception of reality is gone in the first instant only. That's what delusion is. But the last line I found very interesting, because if your intelligence is destroyed, if your prefrontal cortex is not functioning, who are you? Everybody who knows you knows your prefrontal cortex. They know the Ratna who is talking and is putting a public face. That is the narrative of you that people know. So if your intelligence is destroyed, your identity is gone. And this is something that we see in our neurology patients all the time. Like if somebody gets Alzheimer's and they start losing the functioning of their prefrontal cortex, their identity changes.
Right.
They are no longer able to talk like they used to, behave like they used to. So their core identity is gone.
They actually call delusion.
Exactly. So in anger, this is the sequence of events that happens. And ultimately, when they say one is lost, it means your identity is gone. You are not you anymore, so you are lost.
So the shloka is actually explaining from the journey between anger to destruction.
Yes.
Pretty much.
Yes. This series of shlokas actually talks about different emotions. But I really loved this one because out of all the emotions, anger is the one that spikes the fastest. It's like, it's almost like a seizure. It takes you. So when someone is angry, the difference between their non-angry and angry self is night and day. And people say that you're not the same person when you're angry. Of course, you're not the same person. And this verse explains why are you not the same person. I thought that was very important that people understand this.
So from neuroscience context, how can one practically break this cycle?
Yeah.
It seems a very natural cycle which every human being goes through.
Yeah.
And the same outcome if not checked, correct?
Yeah. It is. So both neuroscience and Bhagavad Gita talk about this, but they use very different language. So what Bhagavad Gita says is, understand that who this is happening to is not you. This is just your body. So if somebody were to have rammed into your car, your attachment to your car is an illusion. This car is not you. Your attachment to what people will think is also an illusion. So you need to dissociate from that. The way neuroscience explains this is when you are very emotional, you are thinking from your limbic system. You need to come back to your prefrontal cortex. You need to come back to your conscious, rational self. The only way to do that is to go from your sympathetic system, which is fight and flight, to a parasympathetic system, which is rest, calm. There is something called as your vagal tone.
Okay.
From a neuroscience perspective, your vagal tone is, vagus is a nerve that connects your brain to the rest of your body. And vagus is the nerve that carries all your parasympathetic impulses. Basically, if you are calm and you're relaxed, you are in parasympathetic. Your heart is beating slowly. You're breathing deep and slow. You're able to digest your food better. And your parasympathetic system is active, so your prefrontal cortex is now able to think rationally. What neuroscience says is, if you are in heightened emotion, you are in sympathetic. How do you go from sympathetic to parasympathetic? So there are exercises like a certain kind of deep breathing, movement, drinking water, a surprisingly good way of shifting from sympathetic to parasympathetic, being in the company of people who are calm. All these are tactics to switch from sympathetic to parasympathetic.
It's fascinating how centuries ago Krishna said all of this to Arjuna, and I guess the battlefield back then is what the kind of battles we face today.
That's actually true. So chapter 1 of the Bhagavad Gita is actually titled The Battle Within,
Battle within.
or the conflict within.
Okay.
And I believe that it is a metaphor for that conflict that all of us face pretty much on a daily basis. Now, obviously, a battle between two large armies seems like a very high stakes thing. And everybody thinks, oh, that's not applying to me. My conflict is, which job should I take? Should I spend more time following my hobby, or should I spend more time in the office? If you read the Bhagavad Gita, initially you might think that, oh, that's a very different story. But if you read it closely, you'll realize that the same principles apply for every single conflict that we have faced. From the smallest conflict to the biggest conflict, the descriptions of the conflict itself is valid, the ones in Bhagavad Gita. And the verses that convinced me about this is how in chapter 1, the symptoms of anxiety was laid out. So if you have ever experienced that sort of confusion of what to do, what Arjuna goes through, and he has listed out the symptoms one by one, which is feeling giddy, feeling like your mouth has gone dry, his bow slipping out of his hands, he suddenly wants to sit down, his heart is racing. These are all signs of anxiety, which so many people experience on a day-to-day basis. Every panic attack is this. Every anxiety attack is this. So whenever we are faced with a problem that you cannot solve, when your body goes into anxiety, that is your body going into sympathetic, which is your emotional side. And the way that Krishna has described how to come out of it is essentially cognitive behavioral therapy, in a way. Because it is about self-work, it is about figuring out who you are, what your identity is, which is in a way what dharma is. Understanding what you want to do and not allowing your emotions to dictate should you do it or should you not. Now, what I find so interesting is these are not new problems. Not knowing what to do is not a new problem. It's not a 21st century problem. Ever since human beings have become conscious of their wants and dislikes, they have had these conflicts. So just because something was written 10 centuries ago doesn't mean that they were wrong. The words that they used might be different. The explanations that they've given might be different. But if something has been proven useful 10,000 years ago, it is very likely that it will be useful even today. Again, explanations might be different. So when I'm reading Bhagavad Gita, what I'm reading is solutions to conflict resolution. How to resolve a conflict. I find that there is a lot of wisdom in those words. It is up to us to understand, does modern science explain some of the things that they have recommended? And in my view, a lot of the things that Bhagavad Gita recommends is neuroscientifically accurate. Hi everyone. To explore the connection between science and spirituality and to learn more interesting stories about Sanatan Dharma, follow the Sanatani YouTube channel.